Kekstar Joel floated in the medical bay of the refugee ship, his forearms still trembling when he thought about that day. The human doctor had asked him to tell his story many times. Each time, the memories came back like sharp glass cutting through his mind. But today he would speak. Today, he would tell them about the first time his people met the humans. The Zephyrian Empire had been strong for 3,000 years. They ruled over 40 star systems and had never lost a war. Kekstar had been a scout commander then, proud of his ship and his crew. The Void Whisper was the best scout ship in the fleet, fast and deadly. His crew of 12 warriors had fought in many battles against other alien races. They always won. That day started like any other patrol. Kekstar was checking the star charts when his sensor officer called out. There was a ship ahead, moving slowly through space. It looked old and rusty, nothing like the sleek Zephyrian warships. The humans called it the Lucky Strike. Unknown vessel, this is Commander Kekstar Joel of the Zephyrian Empire, he had said over the communication system. Stop your engines and prepare to be boarded. The reply came back in a strange language. Then a voice spoke in broken Zephyrian. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Lucky Strike. We are just merchants, we carry no weapons, Kekstar laughed. All alien ships said that. It was always a lie. But when his sensors scanned the human ship, they found no weapons. Only cargo containers and mining equipment. The ship looked weak and helpless. Prepare the boarding pods, Kekstar ordered. We will take 8 warriors. Leave 4 here to guard? Our ship? The boarding was easy. The humans opened their airlock without a fight. Kekstar and his warriors floated through the metal corridors of the human ship. The air smelled strange, full of scents his nose had never known. The gravity was lighter than on Zephyrian ships. Captain Morrison waited for them in the main cargo bay. He was shorter than Kekstar, with only 2 arms and 2 legs. His skin was pale and soft-looking. Next to him stood a female human with dark hair. She had introduced herself as Lisa Carter, the communications officer. Behind them was another human male, Tony Rodriguez, who worked with the ship's machines. Welcome aboard, Captain Morrison said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. We have food and water if you need it. Our cargo is just mining equipment and metal ore. Kekstar had boarded many ships before. Usually the aliens begged for their lives or tried to fight. These humans seemed different. They were too calm, too ready to help. It made him suspicious. Show us your cargo, he demanded. Lisa Carter stepped forward. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold. Of course, Tony, open the containers. Tony Rodriguez moved to a control panel. His hands worked quickly over the buttons. The cargo containers began to open with loud hissing sounds. Inside, Kekstar could see metal boxes and strange machines. It all looked normal. What are these machines? Asked Vexra, one of Kekstar's warriors. Mining equipment, Tony said. We drill holes in asteroids and extract metals. Very boring work, but something felt wrong. Kekstar had fought in many battles. He knew when enemies were hiding something. The humans were too calm, too helpful. Real merchants would be afraid. Search the ship, he ordered his warriors. Check every room. That was when everything went wrong. As soon as his warriors spread out, the humans moved. Lisa Carter was no longer smiling. Her hand hit a button on the wall. Suddenly the cargo bay doors slammed shut. The lights went out. In the darkness, Kekstar heard the sound of his warriors screaming. Emergency lights came on, painting everything in red. What Kekstar saw made his blood freeze. The mining equipment was moving. The machines that Tony had called boring were now weapons. Spinning, blades cut through the air. Metal arms grabbed his warriors and threw them against the walls. Surprise, Lisa Carter said. Her voice was no longer friendly. We lied about the no weapons part. Captain Morrison was holding something in his hands. It looked like a simple tool, but when he pointed it at Kekstar, it shot out a net of electricity. The shock sent pain through every part of Kekstar's body. He fell to the floor, unable to move. Tony, how are our guests in the other rooms? Lisa asked. Tony was watching a small screen on his wrist. Mining drill, got 2 of them in the engine room. The gravity trap caught 3 more in the corridor. Jake's handling the ones near the bridge. Kextar tried to speak, but his mouth would not work. The electricity had hurt his nervous system. He could only watch as his proud warriors were defeated by these soft-looking humans. The worst part was how smart they were. Every trap had been planned. The humans knew exactly where his warriors would go and what they would do. They had turned their entire ship into a weapon. The thing about humans, Lisa said, kneeling down next to Kextar, is that we are very good at lying. We told you we were merchants. We told you we had no weapons. Both were true, in a way. We do trade things. And we do not have traditional weapons. She pointed to the mining equipment that was still moving around the room. But anything can be a weapon if you are creative enough. Humans are very creative. Tony walked over to them. Captain, I am getting signals from their ship. The ones they left behind want to know what is happening. Tell them everything is fine, Captain Morrison said. Use the translator to copy the commander's voice. Kextar watched in horror as Tony used their own technology against them. The humans had learned to use Zephyrian communication systems in just a few minutes. They were fast learners. Please, Kextar finally managed to whisper, we surrender. Lisa Carter looked at him with those cold eyes. Surrender? We have not even started fighting yet. The next hour was the longest of Kextar's life. The humans did not kill him, but they made sure he watched everything. They took his warriors' weapons and armor. They learned how to use Zephyrian technology. They asked questions about the Empire's military. When Kextar refused to answer, they did not torture him. Instead, they showed him recordings of what happened to his warriors. The humans had been very thorough, very creative. Finally, they put him in an escape pod. Go back to your empire, Lisa Carter said. Tell them about us. Tell them what happened here. Why? Kextar asked. Why let me live? Captain Morrison smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Because dead enemies cannot spread fear, but living ones can tell stories, and humans love to tell stories. The pod was launched into space. Kextar drifted for 2 days before another Zephyrian ship found him. He was the only survivor from the Void Whisper. When he told his story, the commanders did not believe him. How could 12 trained warriors lose to 3 human merchants? But Kextar knew the truth. These humans were not like any enemy they had faced before. They were clever and cruel and patient. They could make anything into a weapon. They could turn their weakness into strength. That was the day Kextar learned to fear humans. It was also the day he realized that the Zephyrian Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had found an enemy that would not be easy to defeat. In the darkness of space, floating in that tiny pod, Kextar had seen the future, and it was full of human laughter. 6 months after the Lucky Strike incident, Kextar found himself on Kronos Station. The Empire had promoted him to tactical advisor after his report about human fighting methods. Most commanders still did not believe his stories, but Admiral Vexra Prime was different. She had read every word of his report 3 times. Tell me again about their tricks, she said as they stood in the command center. How do they think? Kextar looked out at the stars through the station's large windows. Kronos Station was the Empire's strongest military outpost. It had shields that could stop any weapon. It had guns that could destroy entire fleets. 10. Thousands of Freon soldiers lived and worked inside its metal walls. They do not think like us, Kextar said. We make plans and follow them. Humans make plans and then change them. They use everything around them as a weapon. They never fight the way you expect. Admiral Vexra Prime nodded. She was old for a Zephyrian, with scars from many battles. The High Command thinks one station can stop them. They think humans are just another weak race. They are wrong, Kextar said quietly. 3 days later, the humans came. Their fleet was small, only 12 ships. Kronos Station's sensors detected them while they were still far away. The ships looked strange, not like proper warships. Some were old cargo vessels. Others looked like they had been built from scrap metal. Admiral Vexra Prime counted the enemy ships and laughed. 12 ships against our station? Are they insane? But Kekstar felt cold fear in his chest. Admiral, we should call for help, request more ships. Nonsense. We have enough firepower to destroy 100 ships. This will be over quickly. The human fleet stopped just outside the station's weapon range. For hours, nothing happened. The humans just sat there in space, not moving, not talking. The silence made everyone nervous. Then the messages started. At first, it was just radio signals. A human voice speaking in perfect Zephyrian. Kronos Station. This is Colonel Sam Brooks of the Human Defense Force. We know you have families on board. We know you have children. Admiral Vexra Prime tried to block the signals, but they kept coming from different directions. The humans were using multiple transmitters, moving them around their fleet. We have pictures of your homes, the voice continued. We know where your families live. We know their names. It was a lie, of course. The humans had never been to Zephyrian worlds, but the voice sounded so sure, so calm. Some of the younger soldiers began to worry. Do not listen to them, Admiral Vexra Prime announced over the station's communication system. They are trying to scare us. It will not work, but the messages kept coming. Now there were more voices, both male and female. They spoke in different languages, then translated into Zephyrian. They told stories about other battles, other stations that had fallen. They described things that sounded real, even though they could not be. One voice belonged to a human female. She called herself Maria Santos. I was a teacher before the war, she said. I taught children about science and mathematics. Now I teach something else. I teach things about explosives and destruction. Would you like to learn? Another voice was a male named Ryan Mitchell. I studied your military files, he said. I know how Zephyrian commanders think. I know what you will do before you do it. Admiral Vexra Prime, you are going to order your fighters to attack in exactly 17 minutes. Admiral Vexra Prime looked at her watch. It was true. She had been planning to launch fighters in 17 minutes. How could the humans know? It is just a guess, she said. But her voice was not as strong as before. The psychological attacks continued for 2 days. The humans sent pictures of destroyed Zephyrian ships. They played recordings of soldiers screaming. They told stories about torture and death. None of it was real, but it felt real. On the third day, the humans finally attacked. It started with small explosions inside the station. Nothing serious, just enough to make noise and break lights. But the explosions happened in impossible places. The humans had somehow gotten bombs inside the station's walls. How? Admiral Vexra Prime demanded. How did they get inside? Security teams searched everywhere but found nothing. The explosions kept happening. Each one was small, but they were. In important places, the medical bay lost power. The food storage areas were damaged. The water recycling system started, making strange noises. Then the boarding pods arrived, but they did not come from the human ships. They came from empty space, from directions where no ships were hiding. The humans had somehow launched their pods hours ago, letting them drift through space like pieces of debris. Impossible, Admiral Vexra Prime said. Our sensors would have detected them. Unless they were disguised, Kekstar said. Unless they made the pods look like something else. The first boarding pod crashed through the station's outer wall near the garbage disposal area. Colonel Brooks and his Marines came out shooting, but they were not using normal weapons. They had guns that shot nets and foam. They had devices that made loud sounds and bright lights. The Zephyrian soldiers tried to fight back, but they could not see or hear properly. The foam stuck to their weapons and armor. The nets tangled their legs and arms. Within minutes, an entire section of the station was under human control. More pods arrived from different directions. Each one carried a small team of humans who knew exactly where to go. They had maps of the station. They knew where the important systems were located. Maria Santos and her team took control of the power generators. She did not destroy them. Instead, she did something worse. She made them work backwards. Suddenly, the station's own power was Flowing in the wrong direction, lights went out. Doors would not open, the gravity systems began to fail. She's using our own power against us, the chief engineer reported. The humans have turned our generators into weapons. In the command center, Ryan Mitchell's voice came over the communication system. Admiral, I told you I studied your tactics. You are about to order your remaining troops to fall back to the Central Core. Do not do it. We are already there. Admiral. Vexra Prime looked at her tactical display. It showed human forces in places they could not possibly be. The command center was supposed to be the safest place on the station. But somehow, humans had gotten inside. How? She whispered. The answer came from behind her. A human voice speaking in perfect Zephyrian. We came through the air vents. Your people never guard the air vents properly. Admiral Vexra Prime turned. Around, Colonel Brooks was standing in the doorway, along with two other humans. They were not wearing armor. They looked like ordinary people, not soldiers, but they moved like predators. Surrender the station, Colonel Brooks said. Your people have fought well, but this battle is over. Never, Admiral Vexra Prime said. She reached for her weapon, but Maria Santos was faster. A foam projectile hit the Admiral's hand, sticking her weapon to the wall. We do not want to hurt anyone, Colonel Brooks said. But we will if we have to, your choice. Kekstar watched as his commanding officer's face changed. Admiral Vexra Prime was a warrior. She had fought in dozens of battles. But she had never faced an enemy like this. The humans had not just defeated the station's defenses. They had gotten inside everyone's mind. The station is yours, she said quietly, but that was not the end. Admiral Vexra Prime walked to the window that looked out at the stars. She spoke the ancient words of ritual suicide, asking the gods to accept her failure. Then she threw herself against the transparent metal, trying to break through to the vacuum of space. The window did not break. It was too strong. But Admiral Vexra Prime kept trying, hitting the window with her fists until they bled. I will not be their prisoner, she screamed. I will not let them study me like an animal. Colonel Brooks grabbed her arms, stopping her. Nobody is going to hurt you, he said. We do not torture prisoners. We do not study people like animals. But Admiral Vexra Prime was beyond listening. The fear had taken control of her mind. She had heard the stories about what humans did to their enemies. She had listened to the psychological warfare for 3 days. She believed every terrible thing the humans had threatened. Please, she begged, kill me quickly. Do not let them take me apart. Kekstar realized the truth in that moment. The humans had won the battle before it started. They had not just captured the station. They had captured the minds of everyone inside it. They had made the defenders defeat themselves. As the Zephyrian soldiers were led away as prisoners, Kekstar heard Colonel Brooks talking to Maria Santos. The psychological warfare worked better than we expected, he said. They were ready to surrender before we even boarded. Humans are good at fear, Maria Santos replied. We understand it because we have felt it ourselves. That makes us good. At creating it in others, Ryan Mitchell joined them. The next station will be harder. They will know our tactics now. Colonel Brooks smiled. Then we will use different tactics. Humans are good at adapting. Kekstar was put on a transport ship with the other prisoners. As they flew away from Kronos Station, he looked back at the military outpost that had been considered impossible to defeat. The humans had taken it in 3 days with only 12 ships and a few hundred soldiers. After spending 3 months in human prison camps, Kekstar was exchanged as part of a prisoner swap. The humans had treated him well, giving him food and medical care. They had even let him send messages to his family. But Kekstar knew this kindness was just another weapon. They wanted him to tell other Zephyrians that humans were not monsters. It made the war more confusing. The Empire assigned him to convoy duty. It was supposed to be safe work, far from the fighting. The supply ships carried food, medicine, and equipment to military bases across the sector. Kekstar was given command of a small escort cruiser called the Starwind. His job was to protect the cargo vessels from human raiders. Fleet Captain Zorthak commanded the convoy. He was a proud warrior who had never been defeated in battle. He had 20 supply ships under his protection, along with 5 escort cruisers like Kekstar S. It seemed like enough force to handle any threat. "The humans are cowards," Zorthak said during their first briefing. "They only attack when they have big advantages. Our convoy is too strong for them to bother." Kekstar disagreed but stayed quiet. He had learned that most commanders did not want to hear about human tactics. They preferred to think of humans as weak enemies who got lucky sometimes. The convoy's route took them through the Crimson Nebula, a huge cloud of gas and dust that stretched across several star systems. The nebula was beautiful, painted in shades of red and gold by the light of distant stars, but it was also dangerous. The gas clouds blocked sensors and communication signals. Ships could easily get lost in the swirling colors. "Why do we go through the nebula?" Kekstar asked Captain Zorthak. "It would be safer to go around." "It would take 2 extra weeks," Zorthak replied. "The High Command wants these supplies delivered quickly. Besides, no human ship can survive in the nebula. The gas clouds will damage their engines." Kekstar wanted to argue, but he knew it was useless. Zephyrian engines were designed to handle the nebula's gas. Human engines were different, built for different conditions. In theory, human ships should have problems in the nebula, but Kekstar had learned not to trust theories about humans. The convoy entered the nebula on a quiet morning. The red and gold clouds swirled around the ships like living things. The view was beautiful, but it made Kekstar nervous. The nebula's electromagnetic fields interfered with sensors. His ship's radar could only see a few kilometers in any direction. "Stay in formation," Captain Zorthak ordered over the communication system. "Do not let the supply ships spread out. If we lose sight of each other, we might never find each other again." For the first day, everything went smoothly. The convoy moved slowly through the nebula, following navigation beacons that had been placed there years ago. The supply ships stayed close together, protected by the escort cruisers. On the second day, the attacks began. It started with one of the supply ships at the back of the convoy. The vessel just disappeared from sensors. One moment it was there, the next moment it was gone. Captain Zorthak ordered the convoy to stop while search teams looked for the missing ship. They found pieces of metal floating in the gas clouds. The supply ship had been destroyed by weapons fire, but no one had seen or heard the attack. The nebula's interference made it impossible to detect enemy ships until they were very close. "How did they get so close?" Zorthak demanded. "Our sensors should have detected them." "Maybe human sensors work differently in the nebula," Kekstar suggested. "Maybe they found a way to use the gas clouds to hide." "Impossible," Zorthak said. "Human technology is primitive. They cannot do things our sensors cannot detect." But Kekstar remembered the Lucky Strike in Kronos Station. Humans were very good at doing impossible things. The convoy started moving again, but now everyone was nervous. The escort cruisers spread out, trying to cover more space. The supply ships stayed close together in the middle of the formation. 2 hours later, another ship disappeared. This time, it was one of the escort cruisers. The ship's communication system had time to send one message before it was destroyed. The pilot's voice was full of fear. "They came out of the gas clouds," he screamed. "Small ships moving too fast. They should not be able to fly in these conditions." Then the communication signal ended. Captain Zorthak ordered all ships to maximum alert. Every sensor was turned to full power. Every weapon was ready to fire. But the nebula's interference made it hard to see anything clearly. "There!" shouted Kekstar S. sensor officer. "Something is moving in the gas clouds, 2 kilometers to starboard." Kekstar looked at his display screen. He could see a faint shape moving through the red and gold swirls. It was small and fast, much smaller than a Zephyrian ship. As he watched, the shape split into multiple contacts. Human fighters, he realized. They are using the nebula to hide their approach. The fighters came from all directions at once. They moved through the gas clouds like fish swimming through water. The nebula's electromagnetic fields should have interfered with their engines, but somehow they were flying perfectly. Commander Alex Turner's voice came over the communication system. He was speaking in Zephyrian, but his accent was clearly human. Zephyrian convoy, you are surrounded. Surrender now, and we will let your crews live. Never, Captain Zorthak replied. Fire at will, destroy these primitive raiders. But the human fighters were not easy targets. They moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually very smart. When Zephyrian ships fired at them, they disappeared into the gas clouds. When they attacked, they came from unexpected directions. Katie Williams was flying one of the human fighters. Her voice came over the communication system as she dove through a cloud of red gas. Turner, I have target lock on supply ship 7. These big ships are sitting ducks in here. Negative, Williams, Commander Turner replied. We want the supplies, not debris. Target their engines only. Steve Jackson was coordinating the attack from another fighter. All units, remember the plan. We disable their ships, we do not destroy them. We need those medical supplies for our own wounded. Kekstar watched in amazement as the human fighters performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. They flew through gas clouds so thick that Zephyrian ships would have crashed. They used the nebula's electromagnetic fields to confuse Zephyrian sensors. They turned the convoy's greatest protection into a weapon against it. How are they doing this? Captain Zorthak demanded. Their ships should not be able to handle these conditions. Maybe they modified their engines, Kekstar suggested. Maybe they found a way to adapt their technology to work in the nebula. Even as he said it, Kekstar suspected the truth was simpler. The humans had not just modified their technology. They had trained their pilots to fly in impossible conditions. They had practiced until they could do things that other races thought were impossible, one by one. The supply ships were disabled. The human fighters targeted their engines with precise weapon strikes. They did not destroy the ships, but they left them helpless to move. The escort cruisers tried to protect them, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Turner, this is Jackson, came the voice over the communication system. Convoy is neutralized. All supply ships are disabled. 3 escort cruisers are down. Good work, everyone, Commander Turner replied. Williams, take your squadron and secure the supply ships. Jackson, start coordinating the salvage operation. Captain Zorthak looked at his tactical display. Most of his convoy was gone. The humans had won another impossible victory. I do not understand, he said quietly. How do they keep winning? Kekstar had been thinking about the same question. They do not fight the way we expect, he said. We assume they will follow the same rules we follow. But they make their own rules. The human fighters began boarding the disabled supply ships. They were not cruel to the Zephyrian crews. They put them in escape pods and sent them toward the nearest Zephyrian base. But they took all the supplies. Commander Turner's fighter appeared next to Kekstar's ship. Zephyrian vessel, you are free to go. Take your escape pods and return to your base. Tell your commanders what happened here. Why do you let us live? Kekstar asked. Because we are not monsters, Turner replied. We fight because we have to. Not because we want to. When this war is over, we will have to live with what we have done. Katie Williams added her voice to the conversation. Besides, dead enemies do not learn from their mistakes. Living enemies might eventually become friends. As Kekstar's ship limped away from the nebula, he thought about what the humans had said. They fought with deadly skill, but they also showed mercy. They were ruthless in battle, but they still cared about right and wrong. It was confusing and terrifying. An enemy that could destroy you but chose not to was more frightening than an enemy that simply wanted to kill you. In the escape pod, Captain Zorthak was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I have been a warrior for 30 years, he said. I have fought many battles against many enemies. But I've never faced anything like this. What do you mean? Kekstar asked. The humans do not just fight to win, Zorthak said. They fight to prove a point. They want us to know that they are better than us. That is why they let us live. They want us to go home and tell everyone about our defeat. After the Nebula disaster, the Empire decided that Kextar needed a different assignment. They sent him to Tharsis Prime, a human colony world that Zephyrian forces had captured 6 months earlier. His job was to help Governor Krellman keep the human population under control. It should be easy work, the assignment officer told him. Humans are beaten. Their military is gone. The civilians just want to live in peace. Kextar was not so sure. He had seen what humans could do when they seemed helpless. But orders were orders, and he needed the rest. The constant fighting had worn him down. Tharsis Prime was a beautiful world with blue skies and green forests. The humans had built their cities to blend with the natural landscape. Unlike Zephyrian cities with their tall metal towers, human settlements looked like they had grown from the ground itself. Governor Krellman was a nervous Zephyrian who jumped at small sounds. He had been on Tharsis Prime for 4 months, and the stress was showing. His office windows were covered with metal plates. He never went outside without a full squad of guards. The humans are planning something, he told Kextar during their first meeting. I can feel it. They smile and nod when we give orders, but their eyes are always watching. What kind of problems are you having? Kextar asked. Small things, Krellman said. Equipment breaks down. Food shipments arrive late. Communication systems have problems. Nothing big enough to call rebellion, but too many problems to be accidents. Kextar looked at the reports on Krellman's desk. Power outages, water system failures, transportation delays. Each problem was small, but together they made life difficult for the occupying forces. Have you tried to find the cause? We have searched everywhere, Krellman said. We cannot find any organized resistance. The humans go to work, take care of their families, and follow our rules. But things keep going wrong. The first week on Tharsis Prime seemed quiet. Kextar walked through the human neighborhoods with small patrols. The humans he met were polite and cooperative. They answered questions and followed orders. Children played in the streets while their parents worked in gardens, but Kextar noticed small details that bothered him. The humans were too organized. When power went out in one area, people were already prepared with candles and battery lights. When water systems failed, they had backup supplies ready. It was as if they knew about problems before they happened. The human who ran the city's main power plant was named Ashley Davis. She was a friendly woman in her 30s who always had helpful information about the power systems. She showed Zephyrian engineers around the facility and explained how everything worked. The plant is old, she told Kextar during a tour. It breaks down sometimes, but we always get it fixed. Human technology is not as advanced as yours, but we know how to repair things. Ashley seemed completely honest and cooperative. She even volunteered to work extra hours when the Zephyrians needed help. But Kextar noticed that she always knew exactly where problems would occur and how long repairs would take. The communication center was managed by a human named Mike Thompson. He was a quiet man who kept detailed records of all message traffic. He was always apologetic when communication systems failed, and he worked hard to fix problems quickly. Solar storms interfere with our satellites, he explained when messages to Zephyrian headquarters were delayed. It happens every few weeks. Very frustrating, but we cannot control the weather in space. Mike's explanations made sense, but Kextar noticed that important Zephyrian communications were more likely to be delayed than routine messages. It could have been coincidence, but Kextar had stopped believing in coincidences where humans were. Concerned, the underground cave systems beneath the city were extensive. The original human colonists had used them for mining and storage. Now they were supposedly empty, but Kextar heard strange echoes when he walked near the entrance tunnels. Just wind through the caves, Governor Krellman said. We sealed most of the entrances for safety reasons, but sometimes Kextar heard sounds that did not seem like wind. Footsteps, voices, the movement of equipment. When Zephyrian teams investigated, they found nothing but empty tunnels. Lieutenant Ben Cooper was listed in the records as a former human military officer who had been killed during the invasion. But Kekstar began to suspect that Ben Cooper was still alive and hiding in the cave systems. Small clues pointed to his presence: military-style coordination of civilian activities, tactical knowledge being used to plan infrastructure problems, and the way humans seemed to receive information faster than official communication channels could deliver it. The breakthrough came when Kekstar decided to watch Ashley Davis more carefully. She followed her normal routine for several days, working at the power plant and going home to her apartment. But on Thursday evening, she took a different route home. Kekstar followed her from a distance. Ashley walked through the market district, then turned into an alley between two buildings. When Kekstar reached the alley, she was gone. There was no exit except the way she had entered. He searched the alley carefully and found a hidden entrance to the cave system. The metal cover was disguised to look like part of the street surface. When Kekstar opened it, he could hear voices echoing from deep underground. Instead of calling for backup, Kekstar decided to investigate alone. He wanted to understand what the humans were doing before he reported to Governor Krellman. He climbed down into the caves and followed the sound of voices. The cave system was much more extensive than the official map showed. Tunnels connected different parts of the city, and some chambers had been turned into meeting rooms. Electric lights had been strung along the walls, powered by cables that probably connected to the main power grid. In the largest chamber, Kekstar found what he was looking for. 50 humans were sitting in a circle, listening to a man in military fatigues. The man was explaining how to sabotage water pumps without leaving evidence. Lieutenant Ben Cooper was very much alive. "The key is to make problems look accidental," he was saying. "We want the occupiers to think their equipment is just unreliable. If they suspect sabotage, they will crack down harder on civilians." Ashley Davis was there, along with Mike Thompson and a dozen other humans that Kekstar recognized from around the city. They were all taking notes and asking questions about different systems. "What about the new security advisor?" someone asked. "The one they call Kekstar? He seems more observant than the others." "I have been watching him," Ben Cooper replied. "He is smart, but he follows predictable patterns. We can work around him." Kekstar felt a chill. The humans had been watching him just as carefully as he had been watching them. They knew his habits and routines. They had probably planned for him to find this meeting. "Our goal is not to win battles," Ben Cooper continued. "Our goal is to make the occupation so expensive and frustrating that the Zephyrians decide to leave. Every broken machine, every delayed message, every power outage costs them time and resources." "What if they bring more soldiers?" Ashley asked. "Then we fade deeper into the caves," Ben Cooper said. "We have supplies and equipment hidden throughout the tunnel system. We can disappear completely if necessary." Mike Thompson raised his hand. "What about reprisals against civilians?" "That is why we avoid direct violence," Ben Cooper explained. "We want the occupiers to see us as a nuisance, not a threat. If they think we are dangerous, they might hurt innocent people to stop us." Kekstar realized he was listening to a masterclass in guerrilla warfare. The humans were not just fighting an insurgency. They were fighting a psychological campaign designed to wear down their enemy's will to continue the occupation. But then he heard footsteps behind him. Other humans had been watching the tunnels. He was surrounded. "Hello, Kekstar," Ben Cooper said as armed humans escorted him into the chamber. "We have been expecting you." "You knew I would find this place," Kekstar said. "Ashley led you here," Ben Cooper admitted. "We wanted you to see what we are doing. We wanted you to understand." "Understand what?" "That we will never stop," Ben Cooper said simply. "You can arrest us, but others will take our place. You can seal the caves, but we will find new hiding places. You can bring more soldiers, but that will just make the occupation more expensive." Ashley Davis stepped forward. "We do not hate you personally, Kekstar. You seem like a decent person. But this is our world. We will never stop fighting for it. So what happens now?" Kekstar asked. "That depends on you," Ben Cooper said. "You can report this meeting to Governor Krellman. He will order a crackdown that will hurt a lot of innocent people but will not stop the resistance. Or you can tell him that you found nothing, And if I stay quiet? Then the resistance continues, but no one gets hurt unnecessarily, Mike Thompson said. We keep breaking machines instead of shooting soldiers. Kekstar looked around the chamber at the 50 humans. They were not soldiers, just ordinary people who refused to accept defeat. Teachers, engineers, mechanics, parents. They had jobs and families and normal lives, but they also had a cause they would not abandon. Why do you think I would help you? Because you are tired of this war, Ben Cooper said. Because you have seen enough death? Because you know that. Even if you stop us today, there will be others tomorrow. 2 years after Tharsa's prime, the war had turned into a nightmare for the Zephyrian Empire. Human resistance had spread to dozens of worlds. Supply lines were constantly under attack. Morale was falling among Zephyrian soldiers who could not understand how they kept losing to an enemy that seemed weaker than them. The High Command decided on one final strategy. They would gather every available ship and strike at the human homeworld itself. If they could capture or destroy New Terra, the human government would have to surrender. The war would finally be over. Grand Admiral Yexanoth was chosen to lead this ultimate assault. She was the Empire's greatest military mind, a strategist who had never lost a major battle. Her fleet would be the largest force the Zephyrians had ever assembled, 300 warships, 50,000 soldiers, and enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Kekstar was assigned to the flagship as senior intelligence officer. His job was to advise the Grand Admiral about human tactics and psychology. After 3 years of fighting humans, he was considered one of the Empire's few experts on their behavior. This will be different from our previous battles, Grand Admiral Yexanoth told her commanders during the final briefing. We are not raiding supply convoys or capturing outposts. We are attacking their homeworld. They will fight with desperation. The assembled commanders nodded. They had all heard stories about human tactics, but most still believed that overwhelming force would be enough. The human fleet defending New Terra had only 60 ships. Even accounting for human tricks and surprises, the numbers seemed impossible to overcome. What do you think, Kekstar? The Grand Admiral asked. Will they try to negotiate when they see our fleet? Kekstar had been studying intelligence reports about New Terra for weeks. The planet had 30 billion human inhabitants. It was the heart of human civilization, the place where their species had first learned to travel between stars. If humans would fight to the death anywhere, it would be here. They will not surrender, he said quietly. They would rather die than lose their homeworld. Even against impossible odds? Especially against impossible odds, Kekstar replied. Humans fight hardest when they have the most to lose. The journey to New Terra took 8 days. During that time, Kekstar studied every report about the human defense preparations. General Paul Mitchell was coordinating the planet's defenses. He was an old human who had fought in every major battle of the war. Intelligence suggested he was planning something unusual, but Zephyrian spies could not determine what. Commander Sarah Thompson led the human fleet. She was young for such an important command, but she had earned respect through victories against impossible odds. Her ships were older and smaller than Zephyrian vessels, but they had been modified with new weapons and armor. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Roberts commanded the ground forces on New Terra. He had studied Zephyrian invasion tactics and prepared defenses that used the planet's cities and geography as weapons. Every street, every building, every tunnel had been turned into a potential battleground. When the Zephyrian fleet finally arrived at New Terra, Kekstar felt sick with worry. The human homeworld was beautiful, a blue and green jewel floating in the darkness of space. He could see the lights of human cities on the night side of the planet. Billions of people lived down there, going about their daily lives. Beautiful world, Grand Admiral Yexanoth said as she looked at the tactical displays. It will be a shame to damage it. But humans have forced our hand. The human fleet was waiting in orbit around New Terra, 60 ships against 300. Seemed like suicide, but Commander Thompson's vessels moved with purpose and confidence. They formed a defensive line that seemed designed to protect specific orbital installations. They are protecting their shipyards, observed the fleet's tactical officer, standard defensive doctrine. But Kekstar noticed something strange about the human formation. The ships were positioned near what looked like cargo containers and construction platforms. It was as if the humans were treating their industrial equipment as part of their military force. "Grand Admiral," he said, "I recommend caution. Those orbital installations might be armed." "Cargo containers cannot hurt warships," Yexanoth replied. "Begin the attack. Target their fleet first, then their orbital facilities." The battle began with a massive exchange of weapon fire. Zephyrian ships launched missiles and energy beams at the human fleet. The humans responded with their own weapons, but they were clearly outgunned. 3 human ships were destroyed in the first few minutes, but then the cargo containers began to move. What Kekstar had thought were simple storage units were actually weapons platforms in disguise. They opened like flowers, revealing missile launchers and beam weapons that were larger than anything mounted on human ships. The orbital construction platforms transformed into gun batteries with firepower equal to Zephyrian heavy cruisers. "Impossible," Grand Admiral Yexanoth said. "Those platforms are civilian infrastructure?" "Humans do not separate civilian and military resources the way we do," Kekstar realized. "They have turned their entire orbital industry into a defensive system." Commander Thompson's voice came over the communication channels. "Zephyrian fleet, you are attacking our home. We will use every resource at our disposal to defend it." "Last chance to withdraw. Never," Grand Admiral Yexanoth replied. "All ships concentrate fire on their disguised weapons platforms." But the platforms were not stationary targets. They moved on small engines, changing position constantly. Worse, they were coordinated by the human fleet in real time. When Zephyrian ships targeted one platform, others would provide covering fire. The battle in space raged for hours. The Zephyrians had more ships, but the humans had turned the space around their planet into a fortress. Every piece of orbital infrastructure had been weaponized. Communication satellites became sensor arrays. Mining ships became missile platforms. Even tourist stations had been converted into defensive positions. "How many weapons platforms do they have?" the tactical officer asked. "All of them," Kekstar said grimly. "They have turned everything in orbit into a weapon." General Mitchell's voice joined the communication channels. "Admiral Yexanoth, your ground invasion forces are approaching our atmosphere. I want you to see something before they land." The main display screen showed a view of New Terra's surface. Every major city was surrounded by defensive structures. That had not been there in previous intelligence reports. But these were not military fortifications. They were civilian buildings that had been modified for defense. "We have been preparing for this attack for 2 years, General Mitchell explained. "Every apartment building is a fortress. Every school is a bunker. Every shopping center is a weapons depot. 30 billion humans are ready to fight for their home." Lieutenant Colonel Roberts added his voice to the transmission. "We have studied every Zephyrian invasion in history. We know your tactics. We have prepared counters for all of them." Grand Admiral Yexanoth looked at the tactical displays, showing the planet's surface. The human cities looked normal from space, but intelligence reports suggested that every structure had been reinforced and armed. The humans had spent 2 years turning their entire planet into a weapon. "They cannot all be soldiers," she said. "Most of those people are civilians. Humans do not separate soldiers and civilians the way other species do," Kekstar said. "When their home is threatened, everyone becomes a warrior." The invasion began despite the warnings. Zephyrian landing craft descended through New Terra's atmosphere, carrying thousands of soldiers to capture the planet's major cities. The humans did not try to stop them from landing. Instead, they let the invasion forces reach the surface. Then, the cities themselves began to fight back. Streets were blocked by barriers that rose from hidden positions. Buildings that looked empty suddenly revealed windows full of armed humans. Underground tunnels allowed defenders to appear behind Zephyrian forces without warning. The humans had turned urban warfare into an art form. "Landing Force 7 is pinned down in the capital city," came a report from the surface. Every building is defended. We cannot advance without destroying the entire district. Landing Force 3 requests immediate evacuation, came another report. The humans are using the subway tunnels to attack us from below. We cannot secure any positions. General Mitchell's tactical coordination was flawless. He moved human forces through underground tunnels and building connections that the Zephyrians had not known existed. Every street corner became a battleground. Every intersection was a potential ambush site. Commander Thompson's fleet continued to fight in orbit, using hit-and-run tactics that wore down the larger Zephyrian force. Her ships would attack from one direction, then disappear behind orbital platforms before the Zephyrians could respond effectively. "We are losing more ships than we can afford," the fleet tactical officer reported. "The humans are trading space for time, but they are making us pay for every kilometer." Lieutenant Colonel Roberts coordinated ground defenses that seemed impossible to break. When Zephyrian forces captured one area, the humans would simply retreat through tunnels and attack somewhere else. The planet's entire infrastructure had been designed to support this kind of warfare. 6 months after the disaster at New Terra, Kextar found himself in a place he had never expected to be. The refugee camp on Kepler Station was run by humans, and he was living there as a prisoner of war. But the humans did not call him a prisoner. They called him a guest. The war had ended 3 weeks ago with the signing of the peace accord. The Zephyrian Empire had agreed to withdraw from all human territories and pay compensation for damages. In return, humans would provide medical care and safe passage home for all Zephyrian military personnel. Kextar had been injured during the retreat from New Terra when his ship was damaged by human fighters. A piece of metal had cut deep into his side, damaging internal organs that Zephyrian medical technology could not repair. The human doctors said they could help him, but the surgery would take time. Dr. Rachel Green was the human doctor in charge of his care. She was a small woman with gentle hands and patient eyes. Every morning, she would check his wounds and ask about his pain. She never asked about military secrets or Zephyrian technology. She only cared about making him well. The surgery went better than expected, she told him one morning. "Your body is healing faster than we thought it would. Zephyrian biology is more resilient than human biology in some ways." "Why are you helping me?" Kextar asked. "I am your enemy." Dr. Green looked surprised by the question. "The war is over. You are not my enemy anymore. You are my patient." This confused Kextar more than any human tactic he had witnessed during the war. He had seen humans fight with deadly skill and terrifying determination. But now the same species was showing him kindness that he did not understand. Ambassador John Carter visited the refugee camp every few days. He was a tall man with gray hair who spoke perfect Zephyrian. His job was to coordinate the return of Zephyrian prisoners to their homeworlds. But he spent most of his time just talking to people. "How are you feeling today, Kextar?" he asked. During one of his visits, "Better," Kextar replied. "The human doctors are very skilled." "Dr. Green tells me you will be ready to travel home in another month," Ambassador Carter said. "Is there anything you need while you wait?" Kextar looked around the refugee camp. The humans had built comfortable shelters for the Zephyrian prisoners. There was plenty of food, medical care, and entertainment. The guards were polite and helpful. It was nothing like the prison camps he had expected. "Why do you treat us so well?" he asked. "We invaded your worlds. We killed your people." Ambassador Carter sat down next to Kextar's bed. "Because the war is over," he said simply. "Holding grudges will not bring back the dead. But treating former enemies with respect might prevent future wars." Captain Lisa Rodriguez was in charge of security at the refugee camp. Kextar remembered her name from intelligence reports. She had been a fighter pilot during the war, credited with destroying 12 Zephyrian ships. But now she spent her time making sure the prisoners were safe and comfortable. "Any problems today?" she asked Dr. Green during her daily rounds. "Just the usual complaints about the food," Dr. Green replied with a smile. "Zephyrian taste buds are different from ours. They find our spices too mild." "I will talk to the kitchen staff," Captain Rodriguez said. Maybe we can adjust the recipes. Kekstar watched this conversation with amazement. These humans had been deadly enemies just months ago. Now they were discussing how to make prison food taste better for their former foes. Dr. Amanda Foster was a human psychologist who visited the camp to help prisoners deal with trauma from the war. Many Zephyrians were struggling to understand their defeat and what it meant for their future. It is normal to feel confused after a war ends, she told a group of Zephyrian officers during one of her sessions. Your whole world has changed. Everything you thought you knew has been challenged. How do we go home and face our families? Asked one officer. How do we explain that we lost to a species we thought was primitive? By telling the truth, Dr. Foster said. By admitting that you learned something new about humans and about yourselves. Growth comes from accepting difficult truths. Kekstar attended several of these sessions, though he rarely spoke. He was still trying to understand what he had witnessed during the war. How could the same species that had shown such terrifying violence now show such unexpected mercy? One evening, Ambassador Carter sat with Kekstar as he watched the stars through the camp's observation windows. Many of those stars had Zephyrian colonies around them. Someday, Kekstar would return to one of those worlds and try to rebuild his life. I have been thinking about what you said, Kekstar told the ambassador, about treating enemies with respect, to prevent future wars. What about it? During the war, I saw humans do terrible things, Kekstar said. You killed my friends, you destroyed our ships, you turned our own fears against us, but you also showed mercy when you could have shown cruelty. Ambassador Carter nodded. Humans are capable of both great violence and great compassion. The key is knowing when to use each one. How do you decide? We fight when we have to, the ambassador explained. When our homes and families are threatened, we will do anything to protect them. But when the fighting stops, we remember that former enemies might become future friends. Dr. Green joined them at the observation window. How are you feeling? Tonight, Kekstar? Confused, he said honestly. I came to this war thinking I understood humans. I thought you were a primitive species that got lucky in a few battles. But I was wrong about everything. What do you think now? Dr. Green asked. Kekstar was quiet for a long moment. I think humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because you are violent, but because you can choose when to be violent and when not to be. Is that what frightens you about? U.S.? Ambassador Carter asked. Double quotes. Yes, Kekstar said. Any species can learn to fight. Any species can learn to kill. But only humans seem to understand when to stop fighting and when to start healing. Dr. Foster had been listening to their conversation. What will you tell your people when you go home? The truth, Kekstar replied. That we lost the war before. It started because we never understood who we were fighting. What do you mean? We thought we were fighting soldiers, Kekstar explained. But we were fighting an entire civilization. We thought we were fighting for territory and resources. But humans were fighting for their right to exist. Captain Rodriguez approached their group. Kekstar, I have news about your transport home. A Zephyrian ship will arrive next week to pick up the prisoners from this sector. Thank you, Kekstar said. Then he looked at each of the humans around him. I have another question. What is it? Dr. Green asked. Will humans come to the Zephyrian Empire as friends someday? Will there be trade and cooperation between our species? Ambassador Carter smiled. That depends on your people. We are willing to be friends with anyone who is willing to be friends with us. But what if some Zephyrians still want war? Kekstar asked. What if they cannot accept that humans are stronger than they thought? Then we will defend ourselves, Captain Rodriguez said simply. But we will not attack first. Humans prefer peace, but we will fight if we have to. And after the fighting? We will offer friendship again, Dr. Foster said. Humans have long memories, but we also believe in second chances. Over the next week, Kekstar spent time recording his experiences for the historical record. The humans had given him access to recording equipment and encouraged him to tell his story in his own words. I want other Zephyrians to understand what I learned, he told Dr. Green as he worked on his recordings. Maybe it will help prevent future conflicts. What is the most important thing you learned? That humans are not like other species, Kekstar said. You do not just react to threats, you think about the future. You plan for peace even while you are fighting wars. On his last day at the refugee camp, Kekstar said goodbye to each of the humans who had cared for him. Dr. Green had saved his life with her medical skills. Ambassador Carter had shown him that former enemies could become friends. Captain Rodriguez had protected him even though he had once been part of an invading army. Dr. Foster had helped him understand his own emotions and trauma. Will I see any of you again? He asked. Maybe, Ambassador Carter said. If our species become friends, there will be many opportunities for Zephyrians and humans to work together. As the Zephyrian transport ship carried him home, Kekstar looked back at Kepler Station. The human-built structure looked small against the stars, but he knew it represented something much larger. It was proof that humans could be merciful as well as deadly. Back on his homeworld, Kekstar was debriefed by Imperial intelligence. They wanted to know everything about human military capabilities and technology. But Kekstar found himself talking more about human psychology and culture. The most dangerous thing about humans is not their weapons, he told the intelligence officers. It is their ability to adapt. They can become whatever they need to become to survive and protect what they value. Are they a threat to the Empire? Only if we threaten them first, Kekstar replied. Humans do not seek conquest. They seek survival and the freedom to live as they choose. Months later, when the first human diplomatic mission arrived at the Zephyrian capital, Kekstar was chosen as one of the translators. The human ambassador was someone he recognized, John Carter.